Right, today we are going to rationalize the numerator. So we have three examples here, and we're going to basically rationalize the numerator, similar to rationalizing the denominator, but this time with the numerator. So let's go ahead and get this started. These are some examples you're going to be expected to do once you get to calculus and so on and so forth. Very simple and straightforward. So let's start with the first one. 1 minus the square root of 6 divided by 2. So in order to do this one, let's go ahead and rewrite it. So 1 minus the square root of 6 divided by 2. Let's go ahead and multiply by its conjugate. So what's its conjugate? Its conjugate is 1 plus the square root of 6 divided by 1 plus the square root of 6. So we're going to have to multiply by its conjugate for the numerator and the denominator. This in turn is going to give us, what is this going to give us? Let's see. 1 times 1 is obviously 1. The square root of negative 6 times the square root of 6, that's going to be, these square roots obviously are going to cancel each other out, so that's just going to give us a negative 6. Good. Now this one, we just multiply them together. So 2 multiplied by 1 plus the square root of 6. You can distribute it, but in this case, we're just going to leave it like this because, yeah, that's usually how we leave it in algebra. But nevertheless, let's just keep going on. And this will be 1 minus 6. That equals to a negative 5, right? And then we have 2. We can't really, well, we can distribute, but we're not going to right now. So you can if you want, but there we go. So just, negative 5 divided by 2 times 1 plus the square root of 6. And that should be your answer for number 1. So let's go ahead and box in our answer. That should be your answer for number 1. Same rules apply to number 2 and number 3. Let's go ahead and do number 2. The square root of k plus the square root of 5 divided by 2. I always like to rewrite the problem here. So let's go ahead and multiply by its conjugate. What's going to be the conjugate? The conjugate is going to be the square root of k minus the square root of 5. Same thing to the denominator, square root of k minus square root of 5. So that's the conjugate. Let's multiply across. This is obviously going to be 2 times the square root of k minus the square root of 5. Oh, that looks horrible, but you get the idea. You can distribute it if you want, but we're not going to do it for this example, but you can if you want. So the square root of k times the square root of k is obviously just going to be k, because the square roots, they cancel each other out. So that's k square root of 5 times minus square root of 5 minus 5. So I'm going to rewrite this. This looks horrible, but our answer is going to be k minus 5 divided by 2 times the square root of k minus the square root of 5. So k minus 5, yeah, that looks about good. So that's going to be your answer for number 2. Let's go ahead and do the last one, number 3. The square root of a squared plus 1 minus a. Let's go ahead and rewrite this as the square root of a squared plus 1 minus a. Since we want to rationalize the numerator, this is a numerator, so we need to have a denominator, which this is basically equal to the square root of a squared plus 1 minus a over 1. So let's go ahead and multiply again by the conjugate. The square root of a squared plus 1 plus a. The square root of a squared plus 1 plus a. So sometimes I see people do this. They square root the entire thing, and they think that's all of this is being square rooted. So they think this just like covers the minus a, but that's not the case. The only thing being square rooted here is the a squared plus 1. That's the only thing being square rooted. The minus a, it's outside the square root, so you do not square root that. So in turn, our conjugate has to be a positive a because the a is not being square rooted. So just avoid that mistake. I see that a lot. So Yeah, let's just avoid that mistake. So again, we're going to multiply across. This in turn is going to give us, obviously, 1 times that is obviously just going to give us a square root of a squared plus 1 plus a. Remember, a is outside the square root. And then this will obviously cancel out, so a squared plus 1 negative a times positive a, that's going to give us negative a squared. So yeah, that's how we multiply this. And then we basically combine like terms. We see that there's a positive a squared here and the negative a squared here. So guess what? They're going to cancel each other out. So we're only left with 1. So in turn, this is going to give us 1 over the square root of a squared plus 1 plus a. 1 over the square root of a squared plus 1 plus a. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and box in our answer. And that is it. Basically, that's how you rationalize a numerator. This is an important skill to keep fresh. So like when you go into calculus, you're more than likely going to be using this. Yeah, you definitely are going to be using this. So yeah, that's a good skill to have for algebra. So yeah, that's pretty much it.